Okay, as you can see, we've laid it down on its cradle, and I put some of these wood pieces there to help stabilize it. I'm going to go ahead and start cutting some of this wet clay, and what we're going to do is we're going to build up around the cradle, a decent wall that we can use. You see that I'm kind of going here after a bag full of this stuff. Where possible, I try to use stuff that I consider scrap to build up the walls, and then I keep those smoother pieces for walls and the platform for the case line and things like that. I'm going to build up to right about the neck, and I'm going to keep piling on the clay here until I've got a wall that comes out, at least about 2 inches. Right here you can see that I'm actually using the clay to hold this wooden piece down. If there's one thing that'll drive you insane while you're making a mold, well, there's a lot of things that are going to drive you insane making a mold, but it's the shifting of these pieces of wood. You bump them and they move, and it freaks you out a little bit. We're going to go ahead and I'm using some I'm using saran wrap to protect the mold in the same way that we did when we were making the cradle. I'm going to just gently lay it down on the sculpture to protect the oil-based clay from the water-based clay, and it's just going to keep residue off of it. You don't want pitting in the sculpture, and water-based clay just has a tendency of kind of getting all over everything. As you can see, we've got the diagram of the mold design that we talked about in the last video, and this is what we're working on here is the base for the first part of that mold. I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, and I've started working on the case line around the chin. And then this wall that I'm putting up here will be the case line where the first part of the mold meets the second part of the mold, as you can see in this diagram here, and actually the third part. So it's actually going to connect to the other two pieces. And then it's just about building up that line, the case line width, to about 2.5 inches. You want a decent amount of room to work. We've still got to put registration pieces in there, and pry pieces, and then the wall. So you want some room to work. And right here you can see that I'm building up the finer areas with some of the clay, the water-based clay around the ears. As you remember from the cradle, I opted to use the cradle because I didn't want to remove the ears. So this is one painstaking process that will allow me to keep the ears in the mold, but it's still kind of a bit of a pain to go around each individual piece. And you can see there that I've actually started to fix it to part of the cradle. Once we do mold piece 1 and 2, we'll be able to discard the cradle completely. Kind of speed things up a little bit. You can see how I'm just sort of filling in all the blanks and kind of building outward from the ear. And what we'll do is you'll see that there's a lot of empty space around the ear. What we're going to do is eventually use a spatula tool to kind of smooth that out, to butt it up against the clay so that we have a nice tight seal. And here you can see I found a spot that was missed. I'm going to go ahead and patch it up. And it looks kind of rough right now. The case line's kind of wavy, but that's fine because we're going to go ahead. You kind of like you build the case line, and then you start to rake it out, and then slowly but surely you start to fill in all the missing the pitting that I just filled in here, and progressively you start smoothing out that case line. The smoother it is, the better. The nicer fit, the tighter the fit, and the less flashing that you have to deal with. We're going to go ahead and start with the custom tool here. Essentially, this is like a kidney tool. You're going to just start raking over the pieces and start pulling it together, smoothing it out. You can sometimes use water to help smooth it out, but a lot of times you're going to get splashback onto the clay, onto the oil clay, and that's the last thing you want. Here you can see I'm using a finer tool to go around the ears. I suggest using wood. Everybody suggests using wood because you're not likely to damage the sculpture that way. Okay, so we've got the case line done. Now we're going to move on to building the keys. These are the registration keys. This is my homemade clay cutter. I'm just going to kind of create like a uniform thickness to this. It's all up to you. I mean, there are a lot of people who give you a definite size, but about 1/2 inch, wide is fine. As you see right here, I'm cutting off at an angle some sections, like a 45-degree angle. What we've done is we've made a key that doesn't have any undercuts. Okay, so we're going to lay that down. You can see that I put the pry pieces in. Pry pieces, it doesn't matter, they can be square. The keys are all angled, but those pry pieces essentially are just there so that you can fit your pry bars in later to help open the mold. I'm about to start the walls, so we're going to cut a piece of clay, and then what I do is I usually just pull it off of the wet clay like you've seen here, and then just sort of basically cut it in half. You can control the size of your walls by giving it a determined, like maybe you just want a 2-inch wall, which is fine. I just quick and dirty, sometimes you just I just cut it in half. I get the same result. Okay, so I'm fitting the wall pieces around the case line right now. You can't really see it from this angle, but I've sort of butted that wall up against the registration keys that we just cut. And here I'm actually cutting some lines to match the angles of the wall for this vertical piece. Then I'll cut off the excess. And those lines will match up, and then it's as simple as smearing the clay together to create a watertight seal. And as you can see from this angle, it's a better angle to get the key where the wall butts up. And then, as you can see here, we've actually the overall of the wall completed. In this particular section, I'm adding some extra Vaseline mold release to areas that I think are going to be a problem. Like the eyes were actually made of these little wooden balls, and the mouth or the plaster is exposed. I want to make sure that those things break free when I pull the mold apart. So we're going to start mixing up some stone, Ultra Cal 30. You see me sifting it in, and then I'm taking my time to get it mixed up. I want to make sure all the clumps are broken up. Another good way of doing this is to get a drill or a Dremel and then put like a mixing tine on it, and then just mix the hell out of it. The better the mix, the better the stone. So I put a little splash coat on there, and I'm using a 1-inch brush to paint that plaster into the wrinkles of the mold. Kind of gently, you obviously don't want to affect the sculpture itself. It's really hot in the studio, as you've seen me mention before. So it's the clay is very soft. So I need to make sure that I don't create any, cause any damage. So we're going to add some burlap, a burlap layer to it now. I just, got my normal 5 inches by 5 inch squares, soak them in the plaster, and then start laying them out where I want them. The big thing to keep in mind with burlap is to make sure that you overlap. I think here I actually started to create a pattern by placing this second piece just below. You don't have to overlap this first layer. You can kind of like piece them together. Just make sure that the second layer of burlap, that you're actually overlapping these, right, right here where I'm actually overlapping the creases. I'm actually going to take this off and move it over here to try to get the first layer spread out, and then the second layer will be, I'll go ahead and cross those seams. You can use hemp for this. A lot of people use hemp fibers. I'm not really a fan. It's for me, it's just too much of a damn mess to try to control it. With the burlap patches, you've got a lot more control, at least in my opinion. So after that's dried, after your burlap layer is dried, you're going to go ahead and make a thicker batch of stone, and you're going to apply that. I'm just smearing it on right here, but I'm going to actually go back and see how I've actually made a thicker batch. It's more like a watery dough than it is soup or a milkshake like the burlap batch was. I'm just going to go ahead and start rubbing it in to get it into the places I want, and then I'll go back with my 1-inch brush, and I will start spreading it around into the creases and the crevices so that we don't have any air bubbles. And that's the best reason for using the brush, is to make sure that you've pushed out any air that might be trapped in between, like in wrinkles and things like that. You can also use an air compressor to help push that around, on a low setting, just enough to move the plaster about during the splash coat. As you can see, I'm adding a little more here, making sure that I get in some of these crevices. Now that I'm watching the video, I could have probably removed that portion of the retaining wall because it's sort of pointless. Instead of pressing the clay into that little pocket, I could have probably just removed it and made it easier on me. So as you can see, I've removed the clay. I don't know why I didn't record that, and I apologize, but I removed the clay and I started the second wall around the second piece. So you can see this first piece is already done and good to go. Right here we've got the splash coat going on for this second piece of the mold, and I know it appears that I'm just pouring this on there, but I'm actually going to go through with that 1-inch brush again and make sure that everything is brushed in properly. Something I didn't mention that I need to mention right now is to make sure that before you start this particular splash coat, make sure that you've added Vaseline or some kind of mold release to your plaster on piece 1, or else essentially you're going to end up locking them together. I've gotten several pulls out of this mold so far. We've had one go to Jimmy Fallon, and a mask go to Tom Malloy and a few other people. So we've gotten quite a few pulls out of it, and I'm very happy with the way it turned out. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and finish up here on this particular video. Right behind it is part 4. We'll go into some more detail about the back wall, the third piece. But I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here at the 14.5-minute mark. Thanks for watching.